So let's talk about mitochondrial health, and I'll give the stage over to the CEO of Abliva, Mrs. Ellen Donnelly. Please, warm welcome, and the stage is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm sorry I can't be there in person today. I'm based in Boston, where we just opened an Abliva Inc. For a US office. So sorry to miss the opportunity, but I hope you're all having a fantastic meeting. I look forward to meeting you in the future. As I mentioned, I'm the CEO of Abliva. We're traded on NASDAQ Sweden and based in Lund. And our goal at Abliva is to become a leader in mitochondrial medicine. And we can do that because we have both the internal operations and capabilities, the expertise, and the competitive landscape really combined to make it possible for a company that's our size, we're just 10, to really lead the charge in this area. I think there are a few things that differentiate us from the competitors. You can see a couple of them over on the left here, but the first is that we have a research group. So we have a group at Lund University that's focused on making new programs for our portfolio, and I think that that's really exciting. We also have people in these halls at Metacon Village who are focused on mitochondrial medicine and have been doing that for over 20 years. So many of you probably haven't heard of mitochondrial medicine before because this is really a new therapeutic area. The mitochondria are in every cell in your body. And so there was often a long conversation about how you would actually target those therapeutically. We think we found the answer to that. And so that's opened up this area for drug development. So super excited about the expertise we have in our company that have been working on this for over 2 decades. We also have started to expand. As I mentioned, I'm based in Boston and have opened a US office here. And the hope there is to increase the visibility of the company, be able to have personal in-person conversations with physicians, with sites, and start to build the commercial organization that we will need to market our drug. So it's a super exciting time for the company. I think one of the other things that differentiates us from the competitors in the area is really our focus on the patients. We don't put that lightly. The patients sit at the core of everything we do. And you can go see 2 of those patients on our website if you want to go watch their videos. But I think it's really important to understand the patient perspective in this disease. And I'll give you an example of a few times that we've done that. So we in-licensed our lead compound back in 2017. And the question there was really, what is that mechanism going to do in a patient with PMD? And so we started talking a lot about the mechanism and what it could do in patients. But we also wanted to know what patients needed from a new drug. And so the team spent a good deal of time talking to the patients and understanding their disease. And time again, what we heard from these patients, regardless of what type of mito disease they had, we heard that the fatigue was disabling. I can't get out of bed. I can't go to work. I can't play with my children. I can't go to the supermarket and I can't take a shower. So it's not the kind of fatigue that we see. It's the kind of fatigue that you only experience if your mitochondrial can't produce any energy. And so we went to the FDA and we said, we want to study fatigue. We didn't run from it. We tried to address it. And at the end of that process, through extensive discussions with the FDA, what we ended up doing was creating a PMD, or a mito disease specific endpoint for these patients. Because what we felt in looking at them and understanding their disease is there was no perfect way to study fatigue in these patients with any of the currently existing endpoints. We knew we had to make something that was specific for their type of fatigue, for mito fatigue. And so we worked closely with the patients and other groups to do that. So the neat thing about that process is it was informed by the patients, it was created by the patients, and now it will be tested in the patients. But we actually have the first mito disease specific endpoint in the industry. So that's pretty exciting. And that was all dependent upon the patient input that we received. Our second drug is another great example of how we started with the patients, because that drug was actually discovered in the laboratory when we were studying patient cells. And so we looked and saw that this molecule had an impact on the energy production in the cells. So that was pretty exciting too. So we constantly are talking to the patients and the physicians that treat them to understand their disease. So you may ask me, who are patients with mito disease? I don't know any of them. Well, I'm not surprised that you've never run into a patient with mito disease, because these are rare diseases. They're extremely devastating. So these patients will experience multisystemic complications. They'll feel problems in many parts of their body. So it's not just that my heart hurts. My heart hurts, I can't get up, I can't walk, and I also can't hear. So they really start impacting multiple systems. The patients all have a reduced quality of life, and they have a hugely reduced lifespan. they have severe symptoms, and they continue to deteriorate. Now, there are two ways a patient may end up with a mito disease. You can either have mutations in your nuclear DNA, or you can have mutations in your mitochondrial DNA. Doesn't matter which, either of them affect your mitochondria. And what they do is they make it so your mitochondria can't work. The reason that's a problem is because the mitochondria are your powerhouse of your cells. So you have mitochondria in every single cell in your body except in your blood cell, and they produce the energy that your cells need to work. And so if your cells can't do the work they're supposed to do, you have a problem with that particular organ system. This is tricky because there are no approved drugs for these patients. So these patients, once they're identified and diagnosed, they're told, I'm sorry, we know what you have, but we have nothing to treat it. So the first challenge, as you can imagine, everyone asks us, so it's a rare disease. How are you going to find these patients? Because as you know, I need to find the patients to study my drug, and I also need to find them because I need to sell the drug to them. So the nice thing is that this is all developing and emerging, but we now have mitochondrial disease centers of excellence throughout the countries and throughout the United States. So in each country, there may be 2 or 3 of these. We work closely with many of them. We just ran a phase 1b study in patients in 2 of the centers within the UK. These centers help us tremendously. The people that run them are experts in the area, and they tend to see most of the patients in that country with that disease. So often the patients will be referred from their home center to one of these centers of excellence for diagnosis and treatment. So that helps us a lot. The other thing these mitochondrial disease centers do is they track the patients. So they often have registries of patients that could be relevant for our study and could be relevant for our drug. So the emergence of these has really helped. It's increased patient diagnosis. It's helped disease management. They're seen by specialists who've seen a lot of other patients with this disease. And it's helped with patient identification, especially when you're running a clinical study and you need to find these patients. So that was the big challenge in rare disease. Rare diseases also bring significant opportunities. So what are those? Why would we want to work in rare diseases? Well, we get a lot from the regulators in rare diseases. A lot of feedback occurs throughout the process. You can actually apply for something called orphan drug designation, and that will help you. It not only gets you more communication with the regulators, but also gets you exclusivity to the market. So that means that nobody can come in with my same mechanism of action for 7 to 10 years, depending on where you have that ODD designation. We also get tax credits. We get cheaper costs, and we have the opportunity to get to the market more quickly. So for our lead asset, we were actually running a phase 1 study to test for safety, PK and PD, when the regulators told us, you don't need to do 2 more studies, you need to do 1 more study. And that study will be sufficient for approval if it's positive. So that was a huge deal because we cut a number of years off our development timeline, bringing the drug to the market quite a bit earlier and bringing revenue into the company quite a bit earlier. So that's a huge benefit from rare disease research. We also can run smaller studies. So the study we're about to run is only 120 patients versus 500 to 1,000 that you would normally see in a registrational study. So a lot of opportunities here, and that's why a small company like Abliva can be so successful in this space. So I wanted to give you a view of the portfolio that we have. The thing I'm most proud about our portfolio is that it's all first-in-class mechanisms. So we aren't following others. We are treading our own path, and I think that that's really important. Our lead asset is called KL1333. This is focused on mitochondrial DNA disorders. These patients must have a specific genetic background, and they must also have fatigue and myopathy. This study is going to start later this year, so we're excited to see patients start coming into this study. And that's our lead asset. The second asset is this one that was discovered and developed by Abliva scientists. This is focused on a different disease, mito disease. It's called Lee syndrome, and this affects small children, and they will usually die, unfortunately, by the age of 5 or 10. So huge unmet need in this area. And the neat thing about this drug is it targets a specific mutation that is common in a few other mitochondrial diseases as well. So once we start in Lee disease, we can often expand that into other areas where the same problem is seen. And then I mentioned we have discovery efforts too in the early portfolio. So our drug KL1333, mitochondrial biology is not particularly easy to understand, but what happens when a mitochondria is dysfunctional? Remember, our mitochondria are producing all the energy for our cells. So they are producing, you might have heard of ATP in biology class. They're producing the energy that we need to do things. Our cells need to do things. And when the mitochondria are disrupted, they don't know how to convert NADH into NAD+. And that's just the conversion that needs to happen to get the energy. So the cell isn't doing that. So what happens is you get all this NADH in the system, and that's bad, it's toxic. And so our drug actually helps convert that back to NAD+. That's important. It sounds super simple. Well, we just get rid of a hydrogen. It's actually very important because it has two benefits to the patient. It will drive an immediate impact that'll be symptomatic. So I'll see symptom reduction. I might feel better. I might be able to hear a bit better. I also might see disease modification, because what that is doing is causing the creation of more mitochondria. We call this mitochondrial biogenesis. And so we're making more mitochondria. At the same time, we're satisfying your acute problems. We're also making your system more effective. And so we believe that this drug will have both symptom reduction as well as disease modification. So that's super exciting about this drug. We just got some data out of patients. So I told you earlier that the FDA was very nice in reviewing our project and said, go from phase 1 to a registrational study. Now, there are a few concerns about doing that because you don't get this POC, proof of concept data, when you do something like that. So the team thought about it and said, okay, we need to get some data in patients. And so we put some patients into one of our ongoing studies to see if the drug worked, because we knew we needed that early signal of efficacy to move forward. And we really got that from the study. We were particularly excited because the study was only run in 8 patients. It was run for 10 days, and they only got a very low dose of the drug. And still, on all 3 clinical endpoints, we saw a meaningful difference. And what that means is we were looking to see a change that the patients could feel. Because if the patients can't tell what the difference is after taking our drug, they're not going to take our drug. They're going to be like, why would I pay for this? So you can see the data that came out of, we had 2 fatigue scales and a scale called 30-second sit to stand. So fatigue is pretty obvious. We were trying to figure out if they felt less fatigued, this Mito fatigue, after taking our drug versus placebo. And that's what you can see here. The placebo patients felt more fatigue over the course of the 10-day study. The patients treated with our drug felt less fatigue. And that difference, that 4-point difference, is pretty meaningful to the patient. Different fatigue scale, because we were focused on fatigue. We wanted to make sure it hit twice. And so we did another fatigue scale. And again, we saw a meaningful difference there as well. And then we decided to look at something different because we knew that patients also complain about muscle weakness. So they may be in wheelchairs, they may have a hard time getting up. And so we wanted to see if patients had an improvement in muscle tone after taking our drug. And so it's a really cool endpoint. You just stand up and you sit down as many times as you can within 30 seconds. You should try it. It's actually harder than you think it should be. And so here, again, we saw a meaningful difference between the placebo patients and the KL1333 patients. So again, pretty cool data because it was only 10 days, low dose, and none of our competitors have placebo-controlled patient data because all of them have also been told to go from phase 1 to this registrational study. So pretty cool. Then we also got some more interesting data out of this, this study. What we showed in these data, which I won't go through, is that if the patient had more drug in their system, they actually did better on the outcome. That's super important because then you know it's more likely the drug is actually dictating the response. So this isn't a haphazard response. This isn't just happening. This is happening because there is drug in the system. So that was really neat. We call that a correlation between exposure and effect. Another great thing to see in a small patient study. So we took all of those things into consideration and we designed our upcoming study. And this is going to be a very robust study. Again, this could lead to registration if it's positive. But the study is going to include 120 to 180 patients. They're going to be dosed for 12 months. So they'll stay in our study for 12 months. The nice thing is that they'll stay at home most of the time. We wanted this to be as patient-friendly as possible. So we're not dragging them into the clinic every 2 weeks. We're dragging them in the clinic, I think, 4 times throughout the study, or maybe more, a few less, but not as often as you often see in clinical studies. They're going to take our pill twice a day. makes it easier for them to remember, and we can give them a higher dose. So they'll take 1 pill in the morning and 1 pill at night. We're looking at a lot of endpoints. The nice thing is we just discussed this with the FDA. We'll look at both our Mito disease specific endpoint on fatigue, and we'll also use that 30-second sit to stand. The nice thing about using those 2 endpoints is that we have 2 shots on goal. And what I mean by that is if one is positive, statistically significant, and the other doesn't go down, we have a positive study, and vice versa. If they're both positive, we're off to the races. We're super excited about this drug and the opportunity to treat patients. So a really exciting program that's, again, going to start later this year and hopefully run for about 2 years with an interim analysis in the middle to make sure we're all on track. So the second study, or the second program we have in the portfolio, NV354, is this one that I was telling you was discovered at Abliva. This is exciting because it gets into the brain. So you can see that here, the brain concentration of our drug is quite nice. It also has very good drug properties and addresses a common issue that we see in PMD or Mito disease. And you can see that here. Basically, these are control cells, and these are patient cells from Lee patients. And you can see that when we gave KL1333, it improved the mitochondrial function. So exciting data. The other thing that's neat about this is it gets into the brain, KL1333 doesn't. So those are complementary. It also has a different mechanism of action, which is complementary to KL1333. So what we're trying to do here is build a portfolio of different approaches to treat mitochondrial diseases in general. Some of the data that we just received, which was kind of fun for us on that same NV354, was some data out of Barcelona. This was neat because we showed that actually NV354 has the ability to decrease neuroinflammation in the brain, which is cool and could be effective in other conditions as well. It also delays the presence of motor signs. So again, that's kind of starting to suggest potential for disease modification. And we saw an improved weight gain, which is important. Many of these patients have issues with weight, and so you want to make sure they can keep their weight on. So another really exciting program. This one will start clinical phase 1 next year. So by next year, we'll have 2 programs in the clinic, which is a big deal for a small company. The best thing about NV354 is we've been putting together this preclinical data package for a couple of years now, and we decided at the end of that it was probably worth taking it to the regulators to make sure that they were in agreement with our conclusions. And earlier in September, we had that meeting, and the UK regulators agreed that the non-clinical data package supported the initiation of a phase 1 study. So an important milestone for the company as we knew that we had external support to move forward with this drug into humans. So we've spoken a lot about the portfolio. I think I would be remiss to not end with the team, because the team at Abliva is really, I think, what drives the entire program and makes it feel like a community and will make us highly successful in the future. We're 10, but 10 have an amazing, both broad and deep level of expertise that allows us to work across all areas of drug development. I laugh that, you know, in the US, a company doing 2 clinical programs would probably have 50 plus people. In Sweden, it has 10. And that leads to obviously low infrastructure costs and a lot of other benefits. We're all very good friends at this point. I think our experience is also deep and broad, as I mentioned. Both Magnus and Eskil have a lot of years of experience in mitochondrial medicine and are really experts in the field. And then a bunch of the rest of us have experience in drug development from big pharma. And the team, I must say, is completely laser focused on both our delivery and our performance. There's not a day that goes by that people aren't thinking about the goal and what we need to do. And the goal here is to get this drug to patients and then get it available on the market. And that's what we think about every day. So we've done a lot this year. I think it's been an amazing year for the company. I won't go directly into this, but we have patient data. We've done a lot of safety studies to support what we're doing. We've completed this first ever endpoint validation study for our new Mito disease endpoint. We're ready to start a phase 2/3 study. We've had a lot of regulatory meetings. We continue to work across many different dimensions. Looking forward, we hope to start this study. We will commence the phase 1 study for NV354, and we'll continue the expansion of the company globally, really adding commercial expertise. As you can imagine, when you're this close to the market, you need to start thinking about how you're going to market that. And the nice thing about working in the rare disease space is it's fairly easy, and I say that with quotation marks. In the US, you need about 20 people to go out and hit those mitochondrial disease centers. And in Europe, it's a few more, but it can be done by rare disease companies and is traditionally done that way. So this is going to be a fun next stage of our development. So that's the company. As I mentioned, we have a lead program, KO1333, which is one study away from market approval. It targets a rare disease. It has blockbuster potential, efficacy data in patients, and strong safety across multiple studies. Our second asset, MB354, has just been green-lighted by the UK regulators to start clinical study, and that will target a different disease called Lee syndrome. And then we have discovery efforts that always can both complement our clinical stage assets and bring new programs into the portfolio. So we are Abliva. We're focused on becoming a leader in mitochondrial medicine, and I hope you'll continue to follow us on this journey.
Thank you so much, Ellen. So you've been the CEO for Abliva for about like half a year, something like that?
Exactly, yep, I joined in February.
So what's the biggest difference that you have achieved so far?
I think our biggest outcome since I joined was really getting the patient data. One of the, there's a benefit and a drawback from working with the FDA and hearing that you can move from a phase 1 to a phase 2-3 study. And the drawback is really that you don't have confidence in the efficacy moving forward because you don't have any patient data. So getting the patient data, I think, was our biggest company milestone to date. It really gave us a lot of confidence in the molecule. It frankly amazed me. We were going through the data, and you get these clinical packages and it's thousands of pages of graphs and charts, and we're like, this really does look like a drug. And that was so fun. I think that moment will stay in our memories for a long time. And that really not only increased our confidence in the molecule, but it increased the confidence of investors, physicians, patients. Everyone was excited to see that. So that was fun.
Mm. And since you started, is there something that really surprised you, or was everything exactly like you expected it to be?
Oh, so I used to live in Sweden, so a bit of an introduction. I lived in Sweden, in Stockholm, from 2016 till 2019, and then we moved to London. And so when I started, I've been by Zoom this whole time because I couldn't get into Sweden, I couldn't travel. So It was really interesting becoming a leader of a new organization that you can't meet. Usually I love to travel, and the fact that I couldn't, it was so frustrating because you have to develop this relationship over Zoom. So I think that was really the hardest thing. We were also trying to recruit these patients in the middle of COVID. And so our 2 sites were in the UK, and the UK shut down everything. So the only people, you couldn't get a doctor's appointment if you thought you had a brain aneurysm. You were calling in. And so to try to get patients to come into a clinical study, especially when they're already sick and they're already, they're vulnerable patients, that was really challenging. So kudos to the team for pulling that one off. But I can't say that I would recommend people start their relationship with a new company from Zoom because it's just really challenging. I got to come to Sweden a couple of weeks ago, and I'm coming back this week. So it's nice to finally be in person.
Okay, we're looking forward to having you here. So what do you expect from the easing of the restrictions now? How will it affect not only that you can be able to travel, look around a little bit more, but how will it affect your availability, and how will it affect the company?
It affects everything. I think, just having those personal meetings, being one-on-one in the meeting room, having conference meetings has been helpful. I think visiting the sites will now start to be possible. So as you know, when you're running a clinical study, you can't be remote. You have to be there. You have to be helping. The physician has to know that you care about the study. And so that will all start to open up as well. And then investor meetings, we are all focused on financing. I think 99% of our time as CEOs. And so talking to investors over Zoom has been really tricky because they can fit in more meetings, but they don't have as much emotional connection to the conversation.
More quantity than quality, maybe.
Yeah, you have to get dressed up and you go somewhere. You put a little bit more effort into it. You follow up with it. On Zoom, it's kind of like, okay, next. Okay, so I'm looking forward to that changing.
Yeah, but I'm sure that maybe it has made you come up with a really, really narrow and slimline pitch. Can you just, how would you pitch your business model to the investors, given that it's a very short amount of time? that you have?
The nice thing about the investors is they usually know mitochondrial disease biology. So it's a bit easier to pitch to an investor, but what we talk about is what we have that differentiates us from the competitors. We have research and development. Most only have development. We have experience in this area. Most of the companies working in our area have in-licensed programs and said, oh, this might work in mitochondrial disease. We actually identified mitochondrial disease as our target and then found drugs that worked. And so I think that that's really very different than the competitors. And we also, interestingly, although we only have 8 patients, we have the only placebo-controlled patient cohort in this area. And that's a huge deal. You want to be against a placebo because you want to make sure that that drug's actually working. So that's usually what we talk about first. And we talk about, the amazing team, obviously.
Okay. And when you were appointed there back in February, what did David Lasco-Pooley, the chairman of the company, what did he say to you? What was his biggest expectations?
Oh, that's it.
You must
David
really
had a
fix
lot of
this.
Expectations. I think what probably attracted the board to my background was I'm very connected to U.S. investors. And so as we wanted to kind of take Abliva to that next step, we wanted to get the visibility of the company, get it out there in front of everybody. And that was something that I had done with a prior company. So I think that was something that the board really liked, is my ability to kind of network amongst my network here in the US. So it's been fun to reconnect with old people. It was funny, I was talking to an old friend and he was like, oh yeah, I heard about Abliva from someone else. And that just makes it all, even more interesting. The word is moving across the pond, and people are really starting to see us as a key player in this area. So that's been fun.
Okay, we have a question from the audience here regarding KL1333. When will the next phase start? Will it be this year or next year?
Right, we're working on that right now with the CRO. So the first thing you do is you get a CRO engaged and you start working on study startup. So our goal is to still get that started this year and start to get sites activated. But it's a challenging process. So unfortunately, that's a milestone that may slip a bit, but we're still on track and doing everything as aggressively as we can.
Okay, well, thank you for being so honest. But could you guide us through the milestones for the KL1333? What are the most important milestones?
So that's pretty easy. So what we've communicated previously is that we have an IND submission that has to happen. That will give us regulatory buy-in on the program in the US. And so that's kind of the first step. And that will lead us to have the approval to dose patients in a study. And then, so that's really the first milestone. Then we'll have study start. Then you have first patient in, or first patient dosed in some studies. And so those will be important milestones. And then we have our next milestone will be the interim analysis about a year into the study. And then we'll have obviously study completion.
Okay, thank you. How would you validate the financial situation? I mean, like, what is your burn rate and etc.?
Yeah, I don't know if since we're public, I have to be careful about that. But in June, we had 90 million SEK in the books. Yeah. And we're looking
How long would that last?
Yeah, well, right now we're looking to raise 30 to 40 million to get the study finished. So we're actively looking for additional financing at the moment.
Yeah, and given that you succeed in that with this issue, so how long would the money last?
That money will take us through the study. So okay. That will get us all the way through the clinical study. You don't want to start a study without the full financing. No. So what we've done, we've been creative and kind of tranched the work orders for the study to make sure we could start the study while we did form the syndicate and raise this big amount of money.
Okay, thank you. So what would you say are the main risks for the companies right now, apart from?
Probably the financing.
Yeah.
Other than that, I mean, I think what else would be the risk? I think competition at the sites is probably my second biggest worry. There are other studies out there that are trying to get the patients that we're trying to get. So luckily we have kind of a differently defined patient population with different endpoints. So hopefully that will help us, but we're already spending a lot of time at the sites trying to make sure that our timeline sticks to the timeline. Because I think you all know that study recruitment is never a done thing until it's done. Okay. So that's one thing I'm a little bit worried about.
Thank you. And could you wrap it up a little bit? I mean, could you sum up from a personal point of view? What is it that drives you personally?
Yeah, I mean, I think the team really motivates me. I think I'm driven by the drugs, and we've seen what they can do. I think we really have two powerful molecules on our hands. So that drives me, because we could have drugs in patients and on the market pretty quickly, which is pretty amazing. I mean, I think I'm not kidding when I say we want to become a global leader in mitochondrial medicine. That's what drives us to do this. We have the ability to do that, and I think we're well on track to become the global leader. So that's really what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Okay, so we wish you all the luck with this fantastic goals that you have. So thank you for your presentation and for your mission. Thank you.
Thanks.